The show you're about to listen to may contain themes of violence, occult activity, strong language, and other sensitive material. Viewer discretion is advised. We strive to tell stories in a truthful manner, but press, media, and other sources cannot be verified. Our sources can be found in the show notes.
Hi guys, and welcome to the first episode of Brain Soup. My name is Bria,
And I'm Tegan.
and this is going to be our little show. Since we met earlier this year, we thought about doing a little podcast because we met in a video audio class, and today we are finally acting on that.
Finally, even though
Finally.
we had to make a podcast project,
It
but
wasn't together.
that was separate. We wish that we could have actually gotten to work together in class more so on a podcast project.
But now it's summer, and we decided, why not do this? So this is our little brainchild, Brain Soup, where we're going to really be talking about everything.
Whatever we want that week or whatever we're doing.
Yeah, but this week we are going to be talking about true crime.
Which is both of our forte, I would say.
I would definitely say I listen to a lot of true crime podcasts, or videos, podcasts like Kendall Ray and Spencer Henry. I watch them all the time.
Gotcha.
So today's episode is going to be dealing with the murder of children. So this is a little warning,
A little disclaimer.
a little disclaimer before we start. And it really kind of has everything in it, from wrongful conviction to some devil worship and satanic panic.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So
I didn't know about that.
just wait. There's been movies made about this case, documentaries, books, and all different things. And it's probably one of my favorite cases to learn about.
Bria knows way more about this case than I do. I'm kind of just here to chime in my pieces when I feel.
So let's get started, shall we?
Hell yeah.
So our story takes place in the small town of West Memphis, Arkansas, and was given the name of the West Memphis Three. In 1993, there was a murder of 3 children that shook the small town in Arkansas. This community was right in the middle of the Bible Belt, so very kind of Christian conservative people. And so when this case happened, they were like, holy shit,
Mm-hmm.
like, why is this happening so close to us? So the 3 teenagers were convicted of murdering 3 boys, allegedly a part of devil worship. These men were Jason Baldwin, Jesse Miskelly, and Damian Eccles. Now, as mentioned, this case involves the murders of children, and those children were Stevie Edward Branch, born November 26 of 1984, Christopher Mark Byers, who was born on June 23rd of 1984, and James Michael Moore, who was born on July 27th of 1984. And these boys died on May 5th of 1993 at the age of 8 years old.
That's crazy to me. Like, why?
This case literally like makes me so teary-eyed.
Yeah,
They're babies.
right. They're babies. Why would you?
I don't like it, but
No.
it's something that needs to be heard about.
Right,
Because
there's a lot of kids that are murdered or wrongfully. Well, any kid is wrongfully killed, I would say.
yeah,
But like, 8 years old.
they were babies, like going about their day how they normally did.
Right.
Their normal routine together as like their little trio, and it ended like this.
So they were all friends.
Yeah, yep, they all knew each other. They were going to, I'll get into it, but they were going to a park that they always kind of went to called Robin Hood Hills. And so they were all together riding their bikes to this place and disappeared. And they were found in Robin Hood Hills as well.
Do you know how long it took them to find them?
The next morning.
Okay.
So this community was considered safe. And so when this happened in 1993, it was just confusing to them. Like, why would this happen?
Especially in a really Christian town.
Yeah. And so there's a lot of confusion on the timeline of what happened. So it's said that the boys were last seen around 6:30 p.m. that night, and the crime was said to be committed between then and about 8 p.m. But I saw a lot of different things about it. Like it could have happened in the morning or, and they also don't know like if the boys were killed where they were found
Mm-hmm.
or if they were killed like elsewhere and brought there.
And this is back in 1980s.
Yeah.
We don't have, well, they don't have what we have now.
Yeah. So, but there was no blood trails or anything out by where they were found. So that kind of leads me to think they were brought there.
Right, they would have to be.
But
unless they're really meticulous.
Yeah.
But I would assume since it was outside, they would have to
definitely
be brought over there.
I just find it strange that there was no blood trailing.
Right.
So that night, right away, the families were like searching for these boys. And the police came and started doing a search. And the real search got going the next day. I can't imagine how these parents felt.
No, like, because the first 24 hours is the most crucial, especially with kids under, I think it's 10 years old.
Yeah. Yeah. I believe it is that as well. On May 6th, after a full search, a parole officer named Steve Jones was looking around the area of Robin Hood Hills and saw a sneaker that looked like it was a young boy's. So Steve went down to the actual creek where the sneaker was floating, and he got caught on one of the bodies.
Jesus.
So imagine that. And that's when the 3 little boys were found.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where the case starts kind of getting really intense. Some of these videos of the boys' families, I'm going to stop right here and talk about them. I know you haven't seen any of them, but they make me feel sick. There's a video of one of the mothers finding out, and she faints. And that hurt me so bad to see that. Like, she, in her words, she said that when she found out, she lost all sense of herself.
Yeah, it's her
and
son.
I believe it because, like, imagine just, like, we both have young
nieces or nephews.
and we both have young kids in our life.
Right. And even the thought of that is just like, no.
Yeah, I would fall down to my knees.
Yeah,
like,
I probably would have fainted as well.
I probably would have as well. So I just wanted to mention that these parents, rightfully so, were distraught.
That's their baby, like
3 babies.
3 babies.
Yeah. And so absolutely atrocious. So the boys were found in a woody creek area close by each other, and they were naked and hogtied with their clothes scattered all around.
Absolutely not.
They were hogtied with their own shoelaces. So
what in the absolute?
Yeah.
I'm not saying the word.
Yeah.
But
no, whoever did it took their,
they took their time.
Yeah, with this, and they were mutilated. The boys were. They had bad injuries all over them. I have the police report linked, I believe, in the sources, but some of the things that the police report said that there were multiple contusions, abrasions and lacerations of the torso and extremities. They were drowned and also had bite marks on them.
Ew.
Yep.
What's wrong with these people?
Yeah. So I can't get over the bite marks.
No.
And that's kind of something that leads them to believe that it was a ritual, satanic.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
So, as well as the mutilations that were made to them and stuff like that. So Chris Byers had the worst of the injuries. He was mutilated all around his body, like everywhere. It was bad. And the documentary I watched on this, they showed the pictures of them, and it was the worst thing I've ever seen. So I'm not really going to talk about what was done to his body because I find it disrespectful. He's a baby.
Yeah.
But it was listed that Chris Byers, who had the worst of the injuries, died from knife injuries, while the other 2 boys were drowned in the creek.
I wonder why he was the most compared to the other 2.
That's a good like thing to bring up, and it's probably because there might have been multiple like people who did this, and that's why they really arrested the West Memphis Three, because I guess it could be considered like, because they're both groups of three, but the West Memphis Three is really the men who were arrested for this crime, but then
because we don't know for sure
if they did it
or if they didn't.
Yes.
Or maybe even played a part in it. And they were guilty, but there was more parties.
Yep. So that's why I believe that there's the two different injuries to the kids.
Yeah.
But I really don't know. There might be something on that I didn't see, but I believe it's because there was different people doing different things.
Or maybe Chris was the one was his name Chris?
His name's Chris, yep.
Maybe he was the one, like, main kind of type they were looking for.
Maybe.
And then the other two were just with him.
Yeah, collateral
damage.
Yeah,
that could be as well.
I can see that. I really can.
Because if you see 3 kids and one of them ends up getting killed,
yeah,
the other 2 are witnesses. Therefore, collateral damage, you have to get rid of all evidence.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, because Chris Byers was the one, like I said, that had by far the absolute worst things
that's
done
what
to
makes
him.
me think that they were collateral.
Now that you're mentioning that's something I hadn't thought about in this, but I can definitely agree with you on it. So police believed that the boys were in this area when they were murdered, but this is where I bring up the drag marks. There was none, so that makes me think that they weren't in the area. They were just found. Now, right from the get-go, police believe there were multiple suspects.
Yeah.
And so no one can do this by themselves. There was 3 of them. And, small but mighty,
Right.
Now, with the way everything was going and went, this started rumors about the satanic stuff. So this is when we get into the satanic panic.
That's why I'm kind of like, with Chris having the most injury, it's normally, from what I've seen from, like, satanic stuff, like watching paranormal videos and all that stuff, especially from, like, Sam and Colby, because they talk about it all the time. It's normally one thing. It's not multiple. So that's what makes me think it's even more of a collateral.
Yeah, I can see that. So there was always kind of rumors of satanic rituals going around in this area because, Bible Belt.
Bible Belt, Christian.
So that just made sense to everybody, as well as the injuries. And there's no evidence to state that this was satanic. It's just hearsay of what the people in town believed. They started looking for their suspects, and that's where we meet Damian Eccles. They believed he was a dark person, and that's kind of why they picked him out. But he was also a self-proclaimed Wiccan, which is witch. He was always considered a troublemaker. In addition, he had a history of mental issues like depression. He dressed in all black, listened to certain types of music, and was all around a dark individual. And now I'm going to get into a little tangent about the stigma that they kind of picked out with this kid. So they kind of chose him at first because he was a rocky type of dude.
When he was different than everybody else in that town, which is messed up.
It is very messed up.
Because they're their own person. They can do whatever they want. Yeah. And just because of who they are, they get pinpointed. Yeah. It's messed up.
It is very messed up. It's a stigma.
Right.
And it's a stigma that goes on
still today, and it will go on for a long time.
Yeah, with like jobs and stuff. Yeah. It's like, I'm very rocky.
Yeah, you are punk and all that stuff.
And it's like looking at me and being like, well, you're not a good worker because you have tattoos.
Piercings and tattoos.
Yeah. And I hate that. Like, yes, this man could have been a bad man, but the first thing they picked him out for was because of the way he looked.
And that's horrendous.
It is the worst. There's so many things about this case that just get me, and that is one of them.
I can see why, because even both of us, we both have piercings and tattoos.
Yes, and it really irritates me that people will get picked out of a
Mhm.
crowd like this. And it's not even just like that, it's race.
Mhm.
It's,
Your gender identity.
yes,
It's everything that you can get pointed out for. Your height, what you look like, all that
yeah.
stuff.
And so I just wanted to like go on a little tangent about that because I really found that irritating while listening
Mhm.
to this case, because everything that these people mentioned when they talked about Damien was, oh, his hair's dark. He paints his fingernails black. He, wears black clothing. And I'm like, yes, he may have had a history of mental illness and all
Right.
this stuff. Like I said, he might have been a bad person, but the first thing they picked him out for was the way he looked.
And everyone has their own story as well.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know what somebody's been through.
Yep.
And all that stuff.
Yeah, totally. And
All self-interest, what you're into. That's how you express yourself.
yes, and self-expression is okay.
Right.
But apparently to them, you
It's back
can't
in the
wear.
1980s.
Yep, 93, I believe, is when they
Oh, this is
convicted
the
him.
Okay.
Yep, the boys were born in the 80s.
Okay.
But the case happened in 1993.
Okay, I see.
Or started in 1993, rather. Now, another thing that was brought was an eyewitness call about Damien. So he had a girlfriend, and her aunt called the police on him, reporting seeing Damien near the crime scene about 9 p.m. And that he was covered in mud. So this could have been hearsay, It was said that the aunt didn't like Damien. The girlfriend was pregnant at the time with Damien's baby. They were young, Nobody really knows if, that was hearsay or true or anything. And, they did bring him in to be questioned, especially with his history of mental illness. And as I've read stuff on this case, I kind of noticed he did have a lot of things wrong with him.
Mm-hmm.
So, he was very mentally ill, and he described himself. So, it sounded like we were kind of defending him in the beginning part of this, but he described himself as homicidal, suicidal, manic depressive, schizophrenic, and psychopathic. And he had a long mental health record and was actually just released from a psychiatric hospital in 1992.
Okay.
So that was the year before all of this started. But he was sent to many hospitals and had many incidents. Like in a school detention, he was noted for sucking the blood from the wound of another person in detention.
What in the absolute
Yeah.
hell?
So at first, I thought that wasn't true.
Mm-hmm.
And then multiple sources said it. So I was like,
that's kind of...
wow.
Yeah.
That's horrible. And
Yeah.
that makes me think of the bite marks
Right.
on Chris Byers.
That's what straight went to my head.
Yep. So, yeah. He also threatened to kill his father multiple times. And when he was brought into the police, to be interviewed, he had a very cocky attitude about everything. He was being a smart ass. And that could have been because, he did it.
Mm-hmm.
Or just because he was an angry at the world type of person.
Right.
But he completely denied that he had anything to do with it. He said he was at home at the time of the murders, but his alibi never held up in court. He tried to say that he was talking to the bunch of girls on the phone that night, but when the girls were interviewed, they said they'd never spoken to him that night. So
he's making a story sound way more fishy.
Yeah. And that's kind of what all these guys did in this. They
Gotcha.
kind of made their stories sound fishy, but also, the police could have been trying to squeeze
Stuff
things
out
out
of
of
him.
them. But he did go in there with like a cocky kind of asshole attitude.
That's a red flag to begin with.
Yeah.
Especially in a police type setting. You gotta make sure your story's straight.
I mean, he started kind of digging himself into a hole with this.
Yeah, he did.
Because when the police asked him what he thought like the person who did this felt. He said that he thought the person that committed these murders felt good after they did it. So he was kind of, digging himself into a hole with every word he said.
That's not really kind of. That is,
That's
he
a hole.
was.
He was. He was making the wrong decisions.
Big time.
He said that the killer knew that the kids went into the wood, and he thought the killer could, have thought that he had control and that he wouldn't have been worried about the boys screaming due to it being in the woods and stuff. So
You can hear a lot of stuff in the woods.
yeah. He further stated that the killer probably wanted to hear the screaming. So
he really dug himself there, didn't he?
yeah, he kept going with it. Like, there was so much. Every word he said was
every single word. He's just digging himself even further, making him sound more.
Yes, because like I hate it.
It's gross.
Yes, and I just imagine, if you're wrongly convicted or being questioned to this, that's not what you would be saying, or at least, but it's what happened.
Mm-hmm.
He was asked to submit hair samples and have blood taken, and he didn't object, so he let them do what they needed to do.
Mm-hmm.
He was also asked if he would be willing to take a polygraph.
Mm-hmm.
So right when he said yes, they took him for his polygraph.
And that was one of the main things back then, to see if you're lying or not, even though they're kind of proven now to not be like totally truthful. But
yeah, he passed.
Flying colors?
Yep, he passed the polygraph. He denied the questions relating to the murder, such as at any time on Wednesday, because it happened on a Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
On Wednesday or Wednesday night, were you at Robin Hood Hills? He said no. The next question was, were you present when these boys were killed? He answered no. Next question was, did you kill any of these 3 boys? No. And then, do you know who killed these 3 boys? No. So he, answered no, passed. In my opinion, I just feel like the police were just going after him.
They were.
And I believe now that I'm reading everything back with everything he said, like, they needed to, because he seemed sketchy.
He did seem really sketchy.
With how he was talking and how he was going after them.
And if he seemed like calm and collected.
Yeah, and he seemed very calm. And so we kind of get into where he went to court now. And another thing they brought up, which totally doesn't relate to anything, was that he read Stephen King novels.
That doesn't relate to anything at all.
Yeah. Like, yes, they're horror books.
They are horror books.
But that ties into that, like, stigma.
It does tie into the stigma. Because Stephen King books are highly messed up.
They are, but they're also highly, like, acclaimed. Like, they're classic things.
They are classic.
If you're a horror fan, they're classics. So that's something that irritated me.
Like, why bring that up? They're just trying to...
Yeah. Nope. As much as I love true crime and stuff like this, I hate watching court stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Because some of the things they ask
or bring up
they're not irrelevant. But that's also like a tactic, But it's just, it makes me want to like scream.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I hate it. We've talked enough about Damien now, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So there were 3 guys.
Let's move on to the next one, shall we?
Let's move along to Jesse Miss Kelly and Jason Baldwin. So this case isn't called the West Memphis Three for nothing.
There's 3 of them.
Yep, these 3 guys were convicted on the murders of the young boys. Jesse was probably the biggest reason that they were convicted of these murders. So these guys were all friends, but there's no proof that they were together the night of this incident.
Mm-hmm.
But Jesse had a very low IQ. So he was kind of easy for the cops to manipulate and stuff. So Jesse's story was all over the place. Like, absolutely. The timeline, his confessions, everything. So the police say things to kind of get people to confess to things. If the persons are guilty or not guilty, the police kind of pry it out, and they get you to say the things that they want
you to say.
Yeah. When people are interrogated for like hours and hours, they kind of start getting malleable to this. And that's exactly what happened to Jesse. So he was there for hours, police questioning him and all those things. And on June 3rd, he started to confess to them that he was the one who committed these murders. He said, "When I was there, I saw Damien hit this one boy real bad." So he was just, pulling things out of his ass. I know I sound pretty biased. We'll get to why, because there's some things that were found that we'll talk about later on. So that's kind of why I sound a little biased. I'm not meaning to, though, but I have my theories.
Gotcha.
He started confessing. Jesse was then led to point out which boy was hit, and the pictures asked where Damien hit the boy, and then he said Jason also hit the boys, and it was just a mess. And after he said one of the boys started to make a run for it, and he chased him down, and that's kind of where I'm gonna stop.
Which boy was it?
I don't know which one,
because if it was Chris, that would explain it.
Yeah. So a lot of the things I found, they really talked about Chris a lot because he had the worst of it all. In the court, it was starting to be pointed out that Jesse was spewing out false info. He made up a timeline and said the murders occurred at noon, which was incorrect because the boys would have been in school at that time. This was where his low IQ started to kind of be talked about more, saying that he was making up things. But he did confess to being there, watching, and helping while Damien and Jason really did the murders. So he said he was there, but that Damien and Jason were the ones who kind of carried everything out a little more. He changed the story around quite a bit and was also brought in for a polygraph test. At the time, he was only 17. Jason was 16, and Damien was 18. And Jesse failed the polygraph. So, but there was nothing really other than these, like, Jesse's polygraph and confessions that connect these guys to the murder. Like, nothing was found at the scene that could, no fingerprints, hair, blood, that could connect them. So, it was a big game of who actually did it.
Who was involved?
Yeah.
Was there external parties that were involved?
Yeah, but the police were dead set that it was these guys who did it. So, irritating a little bit because they didn't even, like, question any other people but these three, really. Like, these three, they were like, well, here's our guys. We're done looking.
That's when you would have to go in with more.
Yeah, there definitely needed to be more.
There had to be more. They were so dead set.
Yeah, that it was them, and they.
And there could be more involved, like I was saying.
Yeah, but
especially if they're leaning towards them being like a satanic type thing.
Yeah, it could have been a full, like, cult or something.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
But they were set, so they didn't change their minds on it. Another thing was, though, that Jesse had a strong alibi that night. Like, a strong one. He was in a neighboring town at a wrestling show where people saw him. But he still confessed to these things, which makes no sense, He was at a public place the night that this happened.
Or did he know about it, like, that these were going to be occurring, and he was
maybe
covering for the other two?
Maybe. That could have been
So he was trying to blame it on himself so the other two wouldn't get caught.
Maybe.
Who knows?
That
might be why he failed the test, is because he knew about it.
Definitely. I can agree with that, because it was all just jumbled.
Yeah.
And messy. And, yeah. So, In this trial, though, multiple people lied on the stand.
I can tell.
I want to point out again that there is no proof that any of these things happened, and this could have been a random murder that, like, a random serial killer
Right.
did. But I don't remember his name, but there was a guy who confessed on the stand. I think it was that he said that, like, in the juvenile detention center, that I believe Jason or Jesse, that they confessed to him. And later he went back and said he completely lied about that.
Why would you lie about that?
I don't know. See, that's something I didn't, like, write up, but I was watching the documentary again, and they had, like, his confession tape, and then they also mentioned that a psychiatrist or somebody called, like, one of the lawyers and was like, don't let this boy testify, he's a liar, and they still let him testify.
It makes me think that it was Jesse because of his low IQ.
It might have been Jesse. I just know it wasn't Damien. Damien was in solitary confinement.
I'm like, because they pinpointed the first guy because of how he looked. So why did they pinpoint the other two?
Because they were friends.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, they were friends. So that's kind of why they, picked those three. Is because I think they had been maybe seen together around, and they were like, yeah, those ones, because if you look at a picture of them, and I'll show you some pictures, they didn't look, Jesse and Jason didn't look like rocker type, like how Damien looked, I think, or maybe one of them had, like, straight blonde hair and stuff. So, but yeah, I think it's because they were all friends. But multiple people were lying, and that one kid who was told, like, that, hey, this guy shouldn't testify, let him testify. Yep. It was crazy because they just wanted these guys put away.
Yeah.
And
they were dead set, and they didn't care what it took.
Yeah. And, like, there was no evidence. And there's even, like, evidence was lost in this case, too. Like, misplaced by officers and stuff.
Was it a purposeful misplace? Trying to cover for people?
It might have been.
Because if they had evidence towards little kids being murdered, you would feel like that would be priority.
Yeah.
Trying to get the kids back to their parents and getting their parents answers.
Absolutely.
So it makes me think that police might have been in maybe some type of cult with these people, potentially.
Maybe.
If it was a satanic thing.
Maybe. Yeah. It blows my mind. How can you misplace evidence? It was blood scrapings that were lost by the officer. So it's astonishing that it was lost. Like, how can you lose something like that?
Especially when that's DNA right there.
Yeah.
That could have been on the guys.
It could have been, but, lost.
Oh.
Yeah, it's irritating.
That's agitating.
So something else that was mentioned was the bite marks.
Yeah.
So they couldn't have been human. That was brought up, that these bite marks weren't human, and that there was known to be turtles that left bite marks and stuff that looked like the bite marks that were on these boys, which is just something random, but it's something I figured to throw out there because it was mentioned a couple of times. And there were many of the turtles in the creek around. So that's just, I want to throw that out there because...
Couldn't they test the DNA off the boys? Or is that not a thing back then?
I don't know if that could have been a thing back then. That's something to look up because, I don't know. We're way advanced now.
Yeah.
Like, they could have just swabbed that bite mark in. That was a good thing to bring up because, like, you'd think.
You would think that they would have tested that, but then again, they lost in quotations the blood scrapings.
Yeah.
So you would think that they could pull dental records because dental records were back. They were back then.
Yes.
For sure. So you would cross that would be smart to cross it, but maybe they didn't think anything of it because they weren't on it. You never know.
Maybe. That was, yeah. Now I'm thinking, like,
Yeah.
why wouldn't they have done that?
Mm-hmm.
Ugh. I hate it. Oh my gosh.
This could be our advanced minds going for this time, but
Yeah.
it's just things to think about.
It is. And there's so much to think about.
Yeah.
Another interesting thing was that there was a knife found behind Jason Baldwin's trailer park in a pond. They did a dive and they found a knife. And you know who was stabbed to death? Chris. So
Did they match the knife?
they never mentioned anything about a match, but
You never know.
you never know. You never know. But yeah, that was mentioned that there was a knife. But all around there was not enough solid
In quotations.
Yeah, solid evidence to prove that the 3 teenagers did this, but they were sentenced. Jason and Jesse were sentenced to life in prison, but Damien was sentenced to death.
Okay.
And now this is shocking with the lack of evidence.
Wait, why Damien, the one being...
He was picked out to be the ringleader of it all. So there was found to be like witchcraft books and stuff in his place. So they pinpointed him like he kind of led this all.
But wasn't the other one a Wiccan or a self-proclaimed?
That's Damien.
Okay,
Damien's
that's
the Wiccan.
Okay, that makes more sense to me.
So a lot of the stuff that is kind of pointed out in this is on Damien.
It sounds like it.
Because he was the one that had like the Wiccan stuff,
right?
And the mental issues and all that stuff that was mentioned in these things. After the sentencing, a bunch of famous people started getting involved with this, trying to prove that these men didn't do it. So people like Eddie Vedder, Johnny Depp, and Peter Jackson started talking out against this. And this is when Paradise Lost was created. So Paradise Lost is the 3-part documentary that they did. I think one was released in the 90s, and then another part was released in the 2001, 2003-ish, and then another part was like in 2011. Okay. So it's 3. They on HBO Max, they're like considered episodes, but they were separate documentaries when they came out. So these celebrities really wanted justice for the 3 men now that were convicted. And this makes us circle back to the lifestyle they were living. This alternative punky lifestyle that gives no proof that somebody is a bad person or committed murder. Reading arguments and other things, they keep just continuously bringing up the most irrelevant stuff about these guys. And I'm going to keep mentioning it because it kept being mentioned in everything I read, that they stood out and were different than people that lived in this town. This case is just a bunch of like gossip.
That's what it sounds like.
With the satanic stuff. This became a crowdfunding mission to get these guys out of jail or prison. But they kept getting refused and denied. They would apply like over and over again to be released. But there was nothing that they were doing. Like they could not. Some theories. There's a theory that one of the boys' fathers did this.
Really?
Yep. So Mark Byers, which is Chris Byers' father. So the little boy with the most injuries. So Chris Byers' father, sketchy dude. I understand just some of the things he was saying were just wow, It said that Mark Byers did this. He also got his teeth removed after this case and stuff.
That's sketchy as hell.
So this is when I get into my theories on why I sound kind of biased when I'm talking about the West Memphis Three, the men, Damien, Jason, and Jesse, because
it comes to the teeth matching thing that we were talking about.
So he got his teeth removed, and then his wife mysteriously dies a couple years later.
Do they know what for?
Nope, they don't.
Or did they even test it?
I don't know if they tested it or not, or if they did an autopsy, but he, wasn't tried or talked to about his wife's death. So the father of Stevie Branch also had a history of aggression and abuse.
That is a dead set to question
Yeah.
people.
So all of the fathers, had some sketchy stuff about them. Terry Hobbs, who was, if I am wrong, Terry Hobbs was the stepfather of James, I believe. I think. In 2007, the police found evidence that links Terry Hobbs to the crime. So there was hair found in one of the shoelaces that tied up one of the boys. And so it matched Terry Hobbs. Yeah.
Ugh.
Yep. So this is kind of where we get into the start of them getting ready to release Damien, Jesse, and Jason. So the DA evidence matched and said that he could have been at the crime scene.
That's why I was saying that there could have been more people at the crime scene that they were trying to cover for.
Yeah. So that kind of leads me to think that one of the fathers, had more to do with this than maybe, Damien, Jesse, and Jason.
One, if not both, all three.
Yeah, because they all were sketchy characters. But I also have something to say about hair. What does hair do? Hair falls out. So my mom sheds bad, like hair everywhere, no matter what. If you live with someone, their hair is bound to get somewhere on you or something like that. So that's kind of what I think. When I when I heard that, I was like, well, that could be real evidence. Like, it's good they tested that, but like also
it could have already been there.
Yeah,
prior to
it could have been on the boy already when this happened. I just wanted to throw that in. Could be irrelevant.
It could
be making a point. Yeah. But Terry Hobbs was also the last person seen with the boys too.
Ooh.
So he could have done it easily. So and okay. Terry Hobbs is Steve's. So I said is Stevie's stepfather. I did, but
it's Steve's.
It's Steve's. And he didn't like his stepfather at all. He was scared of him, and so was his sister. They were both scared of Terry. And now Terry all around had some other charges against him, like aggravated assault, breaking and entering, and spousal abuse.
If there was abuse in the household, potentially, if the kids were scared, why would they not testify the sister?
I don't know, because they didn't care about finding anyone other than, they didn't care about trying anyone other than the West Memphis Three.
And that's messed up.
Yeah. When they could have, but also they didn't really have evidence of the fathers yet, since like the teeth haven't been removed yet, or the hair hadn't, been found yet. But
still,
it's still reasonable that they should have.
They should have
questioned the fathers of these boys.
The immediate, at least now, is to check with the family first and testify them first.
Yeah. And that wasn't something that
they just went out of their way to find somebody else.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's messed up.
That is.
He should have been looked into, definitely.
Big time.
They all should have been.
All three.
Because they all are sketchy.
Everybody in this case is sketchy.
It is, yeah. But, police are police, and they're gonna find one way or another to do something. But once again, the West Memphis Three kept being denied for release. Then on November 4th, the state Supreme Court ordered a new circuit court hearing for Baldwin, Eccles, and Miss Gelly. So they were scheduled for the hearing and to enter a plea agreement. Do you know what an Alford plea is? So the Alford plea is something that's kind of confusing because it's saying you're guilty but still pleading that you're innocent. Yeah, so it makes no sense.
So it makes them think that they were kind of guilty in the crime, like they knew something but didn't say anything.
Kind of. So they entered an Alford plea, which granted them their innocence. But they had to say, like, the out loud, I plead guilty to this crime.
But prosecutors would only let them go free if they agreed to enter a guilty plea.
For guilty plea today?
Guilty. I am pleading guilty.
Confusing some in the victims' families who now think the real murderer is at large.
The 3 men were released for the first time in 18 years after serving in prison because of this plea.
So are they free now?
Yeah. Yep. So I think it was 2010 or 2011
That would match.
is when they were released.
Mm-hmm.
So they've been out for
A while.
11 years now.
Mm-hmm.
But they were released.
They probably would have had to change their name and everything.
No. They literally something I watched a lot of was Damien Eccles. The thing that there's a couple things that brought me back to this case.
Mm-hmm.
So I watched something about this, had to have been years ago, and I followed Damien on Instagram. And he popped up on my thing, and I was like, who is this?
Yeah.
And it was Damien. And so that's kind of what led me back to this.
Right.
As well as, you haven't seen Stranger Things.
No.
But in Stranger Things, one of the new characters they introduced this past season in season 4, Eddie Munson, is based off of Damien. So Eddie's like convicted falsely of murder and stuff, and very satanic panic time, so he's based off of Damien. So like a bunch of things kept bringing me back to this case when I thought about what I wanted to talk about. And
that's just a sign to actually like talk about it and see.
So yeah, I followed him on Instagram, and no, they all do news interviews and under their real names, talking about all of this stuff and how they feel. And
so they're ballsy.
Yeah. Damien writes books, and like he has many books out. They are under their real names. It's crazy.
That is insane.
Definitely. Yeah, they do so many public appearances. Like if you type in West Memphis 3, what pops up is like news articles of them being interviewed, or like 60 Minutes type things of them being interviewed. So they are, out here living their lives. But this brings back like the day they were released, there were so many emotions for everybody going on. Panic, confusion, happiness. Many people think that these men got off with murder, and many think that they were innocent. And nobody really knows who did this still to this day, 30 years later, 28 years?
About that.
28 years later. So there's no real proof that it was satanic, or, that these 3 did it, or the fathers did it, or somebody else.
Somebody else,
or
all 6.
All 6, And so many sources were real biased in this, and I feel like I really kind of sounded biased, but I don't think they were guilty. A little bit. Like, yeah, there's some things that kind of point to it, but
I think there's more to the story.
I do too.
And I
think there's a lot wrong.
There's a lot wrong with it. There's a lot more to it, especially with how we are nowadays.
It's crazy.
That is insane. And with them talking about it now, it's even more crazy to me.
Yeah. They're like advocates now for people who are wrongfully convicted. That was the case of the West Memphis Three.
It makes me think that there was another like spree killer type thing, so I kind of want to do some more information.
There definitely could be a part 2 to this.
I think so too.
Because there's so much that I feel like I missed. Like I only got maybe through the first part of the documentary, because there's so much about this case everywhere.
Seems like it.
And it's insane to even look at some of the things.
It makes me think that there's obviously way more to this story.
Mm-hmm.
But there's way more research that needs to go into it because there might have been more killings around that might have had the same thing.
Yeah.
The same type of alibi type stuff.
Yeah.
So there could be another spree killer because that wasn't necessarily like a spree kill,
No.
but there could be more
There could be.
that had the same
Yeah.
type of
Yeah.
evidence linked and all that stuff. But the dads having their teeth, well, that one dad having his teeth removed after is kind of messed up to me.
It is really messed
Like,
up.
why?
Yeah. What's the point?
What was the point of it? There might have been something,
Yeah.
but why not specify?
Mm-hmm. I agree with that because I feel like they really could have done better
Oh, yeah.
with the cops with trying different people.
Like I said, try the families first,
Absolutely. I agree.
especially with them having a history of abuse in the household.
Yeah.
It's even more messed up that they didn't even consider the fathers. Shit, there might have been more to the family, like the uncles or even like cousins, brothers,
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah. But I mean, the case is closed now. Like, there's no interest in them opening it back up, and there hasn't been in 11 years. So, they're just kind of done with it. But, 3 little boys lost their lives.
And didn't necessarily get the justice.
Yeah. There's definitely not. I feel like there's no justice.
There isn't
'cause
justice.
nobody knows
What actually
who
happened?
actually did this.
What happened? Who did it?
Yeah.
Their moms even.
Yeah. Yeah. I can, makes me want to scream.
Yeah.
Makes me want to scream. But I think that's all we got on the case today.
Yeah. We need to get like a camera type stuff because I hadn't heard anything really. I went over the notes briefly, but I was making questionable faces. I was pointing.
Yes.
I was doing all that stuff because I am just like dumbfounded.
'Cause they did everything you could do wrong.
Right.
Like loss of evidence, questioning, the wrong people.
That's what made me think of the dads
Yes.
because that's DNA. If the DNA matched the kid, could match the adults too.
Absolutely. Anyway,
Thank you for listening to us
ramble. We hope you enjoyed it.
Yes.
Hopefully we weren't too rambly,
I don't think we were
But
this time.
also it's our first one,
It's our first
we're
one.
formatting, we're learning, we're figuring it out. I hope you guys enjoyed this and
tune in to next time where we talk about who knows what.
yeah. Anywho, we'll see you when we see you guys.
Hopefully within
Soon.
soon.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.